right, everybody, let's give it up for Daddy D.
Thank you. All right, good morning, guys. Well, for the next hour, there's a lot of different things we could do, right? We're, third week of college football and second week of NFL, so we could talk football for the next hour. That'd be fun. We could talk world events, from anything from what's going on in Haiti to Russia to China to Afghanistan to, and that would probably cause a little unrest. Or, we could talk about, keep it on our soil and talk about Washington, D.C. and 3.1 trillion and what it might mean to our taxes and what's going on at the border and this whole crazy COVID thing and mask and vaccine, and that would probably cause some conflict. And, because what the problem is? What's our source of truth, right? I mean, there isn't one in that world, but thankfully we have a source of truth in here. And we're told that all scripture is breathed by God, and it's useful for our teaching, for our rebuke, for correction, for training in righteousness, so that the man of God can be equipped for every good deed. Do we know that? Do you know that? I mean, that's what we say, but do we know that? That this equips us for everything that we need. So we're in a series now of 59 one another's, and 59 times God tells us that we are different ways, different directives. We've grouped them into 7 different topics. It's important. God wants us to live a certain way amongst each other. So today we're looking at love one another. How many people in the room, we got a lot of business guys here, how many guys are in marketing? Show of hands, how many, if you're in marketing? Okay, a few guys around, right? Well, marketing is crucial. Marketing is important. I've been in business for 46 years in the flooring industry. We've had our business for 24. I was trained, and I believe, and I've observed that this is true. As marketing goes, so goes sales. As sales goes, so goes the company, right? But it all starts with marketing. So in our lifetime, we've had a lot of people spend a lot of money on marketing to get their brands, to see if they're known. And it's early, but I'm going to give you a little test. You up for a test? All right. Let's see how many of these you know at 7:14 on a Friday morning. Doesn't even say McDonald's, but you know what it is, Golden Arches. I'm impressed. All right, how about this one? Nike, right, they spent some money, right? All right, they're going to get a little harder. How about this one? Coca-Cola, you can jump right on that, right? Okay, here we go. Target, there you go. All right, how about this one? What's BMW stand for? Bavarian, well, that's right. And what is that? Propeller in the sky, right? They used to make engines for airplanes. All right, here's one. Starbucks, you got quick on it. Here's one. Whose brand is this? Trump. Yes, let's hold on to this one for just 1 second, right? God has an interesting way of doing things. And if you go to the Old Testament, he decided that through one nation, the whole world would know that he's God. So he chose to start a nation with Abraham, barren wife, old man. I'm going to start a nation with you. And as Hutch pointed out last week, he then took this little family and cocooned them. After Jacob was born and his 12 sons, there were about 70 people that went into Egypt when Joseph was sold into slavery, and he cocooned them in there. And he built this nation where all of a sudden Pharaoh goes, they outnumber us. Just like God promised, you'd be like the sands of the sea. And then it was time to bring them out. And what did he do? And Hutch will be leading there, right? We're going to get there eventually on the Moses thing. But the very first thing, day one, he backs them up against the Red Sea. And then he departs the sea, and they're able to escape, and Pharaoh's chariots are drowned. And the whole world heard about it. And the whole world knew that the God of Israel, amongst all these gods at that time, this was the one true God. And 40 years later, because of the discipline, when he took them into the promised land, what happened? The walls of Jericho fell down just by marching around and making noise. And once again, the word went around the whole world. The God of Israel did this. He's the one true God. Of course, then there was Elijah with the battle of the gods, where he dared them and said, hey, call your gods. See if they can bring fire down. And he taunted them. And just like that, he called on God, the God of Israel. Fire came down, and the whole world heard about that. God continually showed that was his marketing plan. Israelites were his advertisement. And now in the New Testament, it's changed. Not just the Jews, but the Gentiles, all of us. Children of God, adopted sons. And we're his marketing plan. He says that people will know that we're followers of him. This is Jesus saying this. People will know you're a follower of me by what? Right, and there's a lot of counterfeits. So interestingly, some of the brands we looked at, check this guy out. This guy actually put up a business called the Al Donald Fast Food with one arch. Do you know how long he was in business? 3 months. Infringement. How about this guy? Starbucks got started in Seattle, and this guy pops up a Sunbucks thing with a similar face, only a guy instead of a lady. Also didn't last too long. There's an interesting one. Adidas. You like brand wear? Well, Satan's a counterfeiter. And we may think that people will know we're Christians by our knowledge, right? That guy knows a lot. We may fool ourselves and think we're close to God because we know a lot. Nowhere does God tell us that people will know we're Christians by how much we know. You may think someone's a Christian, powerful Christian brother because he's so influential. He's in a position where he can influence other people. Also not the case. Might be, it's attendance. Boy, this guy's here every single Friday morning, active in his church. He's like, if something's going on, he's there, right? Doesn't necessarily give you any idea where we're at. The whole thing comes down to love. Take a look at your table card. All right, let's look at the first verse. This is the way it is, but it's not the way it should be. But understand this, in the last days, terrible times will come. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. Turn away from such as these. It's pretty close commentary to our time, certainly. And because of this, we can get numb ourselves, right? We're around people who are all about themselves. We can quickly become all about ourselves. God calls us to a higher place. Look what it says. This is God's marketing plan. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. So, if love is so important, where do we get it? If I ask you, if I ask you to go get something, I say, this is very important to me, and I describe what it is, the first thing you can say is, well, where do I get it, right? So where do we get love? Well, let's look at it. John says, the disciple John says, I'm writing to remind you, dear friends, that we should love one another. This is not a new commandment, but one we have had from the beginning. Okay, this is important, right? This is number one. Love is number one. So where do we get it? Beloved, let us love one another because love comes from God. Sandy and I, Ryan could tell you, he's been around 44 years as of today, right? Sandy and I, through our life, we've had our ups and downs. I mean, we've had a marriage and we've worked through some things and we're committed to staying together. But along the way, we were stuck. And when I first was being mentored by Gail, we got Gail involved. I said, with business and me coming home and we'll get into a conflict real early. And so this is what he did for me. He held this up. And he said, I'm not a counselor, nor am I the son of a counselor. But I can tell you this, right now you're here and Sandy's here and God's here. And if you want to figure out how to love, get closer to him. Get closer to him. Do we want to know God so close that we get to know who he is? And then we don't forget who he is. And we don't forget what he's done for us. And because of what he's done for us, and because of his love for us, love will naturally outpour, but we can't get there if we're down here and she's over here. And whether that's my marriage or whether that's any part of my life, this simple truth is true. We need to get to the top of the triangle. As Sandy and I both moved up the triangle, we naturally got closer to each other. We've got a great marriage today. I didn't think I thought I was going to have a tolerated marriage. But because we both went on this journey, we naturally get closer to each other. That's also true about all of us. Why is there such closeness in the room? We've got guys that are all getting closer to each other, to go closer to God, and therefore getting closer to each other. The question I have for you is this your goal? Love comes from God. Do you really want to get to know God? And if you do, what are you doing about it? Are you spending the time with him? Are you digging into this word which he breathed out? Are you breathing it back in? Hearing what he has to say, you personally. That's where love comes from. All right, so that's where love comes from. Why is this so important? Why is it so important that we love? Well, one is because we are God's advertisement. We are his marketing plan. We're his message to the world of who he is. How his followers act, and the people see it and they know you're a Christian. You're like, wow, I want to get to know that God that you know so I can get some of what you have. But it's also true that without love, where are we at? So in 1 Corinthians 13, interesting placed chapter, right? The love chapter. You know what's in 1 Corinthians 12 and 1 Corinthians 14? Spiritual gifts. So in 1 Corinthians 12, Paul's talking about spiritual gifts. And then in chapter 14, he goes on to talk about spiritual gifts, but right in between he says, hey, look, you can have, well, let me just read it. If you could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy and I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but I didn't love others, I would be nothing. Why is love important? We're God's marketing plan, we're his advertisement, but without it, God says we're nothing. If we're not acting in love, we're nothing. What we're doing doesn't mean anything. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it, but if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Why is love important? Because God's love. And now we're reflecting who he is. It shows that we know who he is. We know him. We haven't forgotten who he is. We know what he's done. And therefore, it pours out of us. Okay, so what is love? Well, Jesus was asked that by a lawyer, right? Lawyer comes to him and says, hey, what's the most important law? It's in Matthew 22, if you want to read it. And Jesus says, well, love the Lord your God. He went right to the top of the triangle. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. So, hey, Steve, heads up. Oh. So why did you put up your hand to catch that? Because you're protecting yourself. It was natural. It was a natural reaction, right? Why? Because you love yourself. You don't want to get hurt. A can's heading your way, right? What Jesus is telling us is love is natural. First of all, love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And when you do that, it becomes natural. Now love others like you love yourself. Of course you're going to do that. Of course you're going to help yourself. Of course you're going to look out for yourself. Jesus is saying, do that for others. Live like that. Let it flow. And it will flow if we're at the top of the triangle. Here's what Paul says in terms of what love is. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. How was your week? How was your interactions with other people? It does not demand its own way. It's not irritable. It keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Love is the fuel. Love is the engine. Love comes from God. Love comes from our time with God. And then it's a natural flow. Just like we love ourselves is natural. All of a sudden it becomes natural. But it comes from God. So, how do we get it? How do we get it? And what is it? So, Jesus, said an interesting thing. Paul said an interesting thing regarding our marriage. He said we're supposed to love our wives like Christ loved the church. How did Christ love the church? Well, he says it. He gave himself for it, right? Jesus wasn't on the cross going, this wasn't my fault. You guys, you did all this stuff, and this is why I'm up here. No, think of what he went through. Think of what he could have done when he was being slapped in the face and whipped. But he was doing it out of love and out of the Father's will. And we wouldn't be told to love like that if we couldn't. But we're told to love like that, and we can because of the Holy Spirit that's in us and because of the relationship and the time we spend at the top of the triangle, you know who God is, and therefore it naturally flows through us and out of us. That's the life that God wants us to live. Agape love. What's agape love? 200 times in the New Testament, love is referred to as agape, okay? There's brotherly love, phileo love, there's passionate love, ego love, I think that's how you pronounce it, and there's agape love. What's this agape love? How would you define agape love? As I looked into this week, here's what it was love. It's a love that's pure. It's a love that's willful. You decide, you make a decision, you're going to love like this. And it's a love that's sacrificial. You give something up for somebody else. Whether that's your time, whether it's your resources. Maybe it's just your ear when you want to be going on and doing something else. Jesus told a story. They asked, they said, hey, okay, that's what love is. Well, who loves like that? And so Jesus says, well, let me tell you a story. There was a priest, there was a temple guy, and there was a Samaritan. I wonder why we always get jokes in threes, right? So Jesus tells a story. There's three. Here comes there's a Jewish guy is beaten up, taken and thrown on the side of the road to die. And here comes a priest. And he looks at him and he goes to the other side of the road and goes around because he had something to do, somewhere to go, something that was on his schedule that he had to take care of. And then the assistant at the church came along, and he at least went over and looked at the guy. And went, all right, and then he kept going. And then here comes a Samaritan, and they hated the Samaritans because Samaritans were mixed. And they didn't have quite the same beliefs. And so Jerusalem Jews did not like Samaritans that go around them. Well, here in Jesus' story, the Samaritan comes and he picks the guy up, he cleans him, he puts oil on him, he puts him on his donkey, takes him to the inn, tells the innkeeper, feed him, take care of him, here's 2 silver coins. When I come back, if it costs more, I'll give you more money when I come back. Let's get this guy back to health. And Jesus says, who loved him? Who was his neighbor? Well, yeah, that should hit home for us, right? I don't know if you have any prejudices in your life. I don't know if you have any person in your life that you're bitter toward. If we look at these verses, I listed all 17. The 59, there's 17 love one another. And we're told that we have to love one another. And if we don't, it means our faith is not real. Wow. Wow. Nowhere are we told if we don't have knowledge, your faith isn't real. Nowhere are we told if you don't show up all the time, your faith is not real. Nowhere are we say if you're not influencing people powerfully, your faith is not real. We're told if we don't love properly, our faith isn't real. You know what that means? We don't have the option. We don't have the option to be bitter towards someone. We don't have the option to not forgive somebody. If we don't forgive somebody, we don't know how we've been forgiven. We don't realize what Jesus paid. When we know that, we are naturally going to forgive because we've been forgiven so much. And Jesus talks about this a lot, but it still carries on. The toughest lunches I have are with a guy that says, I can't forgive. And I look at him and say, how can you not forgive? That's saying a lot. You're shouting to me about where your heart is. You need to look at this. This should be a red flag in your eyes. Guys, if you have this, take this serious. If we can't forgive somebody else, we don't know the Father. We don't know what Jesus did. We don't know what love is. And then he says, you don't know me. If you love me, you know me. Go back to where it says, I think it was the second verse down. No, the last one down. Beloved, let us love one another because love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God because God is love. Wow. So we're going to send it to the tables, and we'll come back and wrap up at the end. The heart of the message is this. God is love. He's in the top of the triangle. We have to spend time there. We want to know who he is. And when we know who he is, we're going to catch that love, and it's naturally going to pour out just like it does for ourselves. If we don't have that, we've got to ask ourselves some questions. You've got to get alone. You've got to go to the top of the triangle and say, God, I'm missing something. Be honest with him. Be open with him. The great news is he gives us the Holy Spirit that'll come inside of us and break down whatever wall's there, and you will be a new person. If you just ask for the help, if you just let this go, you can be a loving person. If you're not walking, when you walked in here this morning, you can be a loving person walking out of here because that's the power that he gives us. That's his love in us, through us, onto other people, and that's what we're called to be. And then we can be an advertisement for God. Then we can be part of his marketing plan. So I'm going to ask the question one more time before we send the tables. Who's in marketing? Who's in marketing? We all are. We are marketing love for God the Father. All right, let's go to the tables. So let me hear from the floor, something that hit you today, something from the table as you discussed, something from the teaching we went through, anything that you're leaving with that went, wow, that kind of hit me.
So I got to wondering, You know, all of these verses that Ron did are in the New Testament. So what does God say about love in the Old Testament? And Moses is talking to the people, and he says in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 9, "Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. He is a faithful God, keeping his covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments."
Awesome. Excellent, Ken. Tim.
Yeah, love can be as simple as a parking attendant giving a funny gesture, but it makes the person laugh. And it can be as simple as the store clerk's name tag, and just saying, "Thank you, Charlie." And then they'll wonder, why are you so happy? And that's a doorway for us to spread. But we got to make them smile and happy first.
Love can light up anywhere, anytime, any place, right?
Yeah, and question 2, we were looking at that, and it's like, I'm trying to process that. But in the end, as a table, discuss the gap that often exists between what we appreciate about others, but what we prioritize for ourselves. And what we appreciate about others is selflessness. But what we prioritize for ourselves is selfishness. So that's it in a nutshell.
It's such a big gap, isn't it? From what we appreciate with others and what we put on ourselves and what we realize. And it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, we can definitely close that. I'm going to quick tell on myself, okay? I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to. So this trip we were on a week ago this morning, I was going to meet up with my brothers, and we played a game of golf. We went to the Brewers game and all the rest. So Sandy needed a car, so we went to get this rental car at Enterprise. And as I walked in the door, as soon as I opened the door, there was a customer, in an open spot. And I opened the door, and the guy says, "Can I help you?" As I walked in the door, and Sandy's next to me. And I took 2 more steps. He said, "Can I help you?" And so I was working my way to him, and I got there. He says, "Can I help you?" And I was like, dude. And so I've replayed in my mind what I could have done, right? But I didn't. Instead, I got off of a call when I pulled in the parking lot, and I needed to get back on that call. I interrupted the call, and I needed to get back on the call. And so my goal was get in, get the car, and get out, right? Give the car to Sandy, and I'm on my way to see my dad. Before I see my brothers, I'm going to get back on this call on the way there. I treated that guy horribly, absolutely horribly. I was demanding. I was short. I was everything I should not be, right? In the end, Sandy got an upgrade, so I could justify it. Thankfully, my wife, we talked about it that night. She said she was embarrassed standing next to me, that she was uncomfortable standing next to me. And where did that come from? I didn't know that was in you anymore, Ron, is what she said. And so here, you know, we always think it's someone else. When I read that first, I've been under conviction this week, and for a couple of reasons. Look at 2 Timothy 3. You can always read this. This is somebody else, right? Having a form of godliness, but denying the power. When I walked in there, do you think that guy had any clue that I was a Christian? Was I an advertisement for the love of God that I have in my life? Absolutely not. I looked right past him from the call to the call, get Sandy the call, and get out. Then I read the story about the Samaritan on the side of the road and the priest who just went right by him because he had somewhere to go and something to do, right? Wow. Why did I do that to that guy? You know, this, as Ryan said, this has been 20 years here. I can tell you this, and some of you guys will remember it. I was so uncomfortable talking at first. I did not want the microphone. And I would ask Gail afterwards, how'd I do? And Gail would always say, wrong question. How did you love? If you loved well, you did well. If you didn't love, it was worthless. I didn't totally get it. I mean, I didn't totally get it back then, but slowly I did. And the more I started to love, the more comfortable I got speaking with a microphone in my hand because the attention wasn't on me. We're called to live like this, right? Do you know I owe you something? Do you know I owed that guy at the rental place something? We didn't go through the 17 verses, but I encourage you to go through them. Owe nothing to anyone except your obligation to love one another. If you love your neighbor, you will fulfill the requirements of God's law. That last verse on the final page is from Galatians. You have been called to live in freedom, my brothers, but don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. And for me, the application is, while I may think that phone call and getting back on that phone call, getting my wife was the objective, that wasn't. It was that guy at the counter. I had a chance to advertise. I had a chance to market, and I couldn't. There's so many things I could have done. I could have walked in and went, oh, I get it. This is a film for how not to do it. I'll go back out the door, and then I'll come back in, and then we'll do it the right way. I mean, there's things you can do like that if you're flowing in love, right? So why do we unplug? Why do I unplug? I don't know. I don't know exactly. Because I believe, this is what I believe. We're capable of doing anything in our flesh. The question is, are we going to stay there? We're all in process. None of them are going to be perfect. But are we going to stay there? Or are we going to grow? And are we going to progress? And are we going to move on? And so that's what the tire is about. You know, we're living life and we're rolling along and we're separated, but then we come back together, and that hub really should be our time with God. It's our time with each other. And as we said last time into one another's, God calls us to connect, to build each other up. And so we want to come together, but we want to come together with Him. Because when we're together here and close, when we go out here and separate, we can roll properly, right? And part of that roll is love. So next week, as we're in our new place, we're going to hit on encouraging one another. So if I discourage you, which I did to that guy at the counter, I'm pulling courage out of you by the way I'm acting, right? It's like, if I'm encouraging you, I'm putting courage in you. How do we do that? That's what we want to do with each other. We're told to encourage one another. So that's what we're going to hit on next week. All right? Go ahead and close at your tables, and we'll see you back here next week. Thanks, guys.